So this is a wonderful picture of Loma Linda University in California. It's quite beautiful out there. I've actually been out there a long time ago. It's very beautiful, but I'm showing this because I want everyone to understand that we're not having an open discussion about what are the facts when it comes to the issue of Adventist and vaccines. It's not an open discussion, and there's reasons for that. And I'm showing the buildings here because I want you to understand that there is a vested interest to make sure that the medicine that we promote, the medicine that is practiced, is medicine that is in harmony with the powers that be, whether it be the American Medical Association, the Joint Accrediting Association, whether it be with whoever the powers are. We want to make sure our medicine is in harmony with that because we've invested a lot into this system. So much so, in fact, that if you look here, this is the Loma Linda Children's Hospital, and you can see here this was a article in California Healthline, and there was $1.2 billion invested in this facility here. And I just want you to understand that when you have $1.2 billion invested in something, you are not going to bite the hand that feeds you. You're not going to say something that goes against the grain. You're not going to say, hey, we don't believe in vaccines. You can't do that at this point. You've already invested so much time and effort that you're not going to go against it. So my point is that when people beat their head against the wall and say, yes, but there's this injury and there's that injury and there's the vaccination compensation injury program and we have all this, I want you to understand that you're not having an open discussion, that there are 1.2 billion reasons to continue the status quo when it comes to medicine. And you can debate whether or not that's good or bad, but I want you to understand that there is a vested interest in continuing medicine as it is. And so this is why you don't hear the facts about the Adventist history or our Adventist heritage and vaccination. You don't hear the whole story because of this. So back to our 2015 statement, and this, of course, statement has raised a lot of ire. Our friend Hank at SDA Pearl has done a wonderful job of trying to get people to understand that we don't base our faith on peer-reviewed literature, and I think that's a noble endeavor. But my issue here is that this statement is buttressed by also the Bible and the inspiration of Ellen White. Now, unfortunately, when we talk about our position on vaccines, no one seems to ever want to go to the Bible. It simply goes to Ellen White. But I want you to understand that this also is a part of why the people at the very top, some who are honest, are saying, no, this statement is right, this statement is good because of what Ellen White said. So let's read it together just briefly. The Seventh-day Adventist Church places strong emphasis on health and well-being. The Adventist health emphasis is based on biblical revelation, the inspired writings of Ellen White, co-founder of the church, and on peer-reviewed scientific literature. As such, we encourage responsible immunization, vaccination, and have no religious or faith-based reason not to encourage our adherents to responsibly participate in protective and preventive immunization programs. I just want to notice the sentence here, even though I didn't read it very well, but notice it's very clear. We have no religious or faith-based reason not to encourage. In other words, there's nothing in our faith that should make us pause or say no. And what's in our faith? Biblical revelation and the writings of Ellen White. And the people who promote this definitely believe that the Bible, Ellen White, along with peer-reviewed literature, strengthen or give teeth to this statement. And so what we're going to focus mostly on is the Adventist history and Ellen White specifically. So finish reading. He says, we value the health and safety of the population, which includes maintenance of herd immunity. Again, notice that this is a pro-vaccine statement, very pro. You have no reason, faith-based or religious, not to participate, and it is part of our belief in the scriptures and Ellen White and peer-reviewed literature that we need to also maintain herd immunity. And then, of course, here's the little caveat. We are not the conscience of the individual member and recognize individual choices. These are exercised by the individual. In other words, you're out on your own if you're going to resist what we think is good. The choice not to be immunized is not and should not be seen as the dogma nor doctrine of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now notice this last statement, this last sentence could have read, the choice to be immunized or not. No. The choice to be immunized is not. In other words, the choice to resist immunizations should never be seen as doctrine or dogma of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. However, the choice to be immunized seems to be within the doctrine and dogma of the church. So that's how it reads. But the problem is that the history and the evidence doesn't seem to stack up. So this is the letter that everyone wheels out. Anytime someone says, I don't want to get a vaccine, they say, well, Ellen White got a vaccine. And you go, where? It's not in any of her writings. She's never, and all the hundreds of thousands of pages that she wrote and the books that she published, she never wrote one treatise on vaccines. She never said anything or wrote down anything on it. And so you could do your search engine, you won't find anything, but you will find this statement by D.E. Robinson. And this statement is the statement for which we have signed on to every vaccine that has ever been made after the smallpox vaccine. And so here is D.E. Robinson, and I want you to pay attention to how he words this and how he's going to make his argument. Because what he says here is considered essentially the gospel when it comes to vaccination, in Ellen White's opinion. He basically says, he writes, "Dear brother, you asked for a definite and concise information regarding what Sister Wright wrote about vaccination and serum. This question can only be answered very briefly. For so far as we have any record, she did not refer to them in any of her writings." He's right, she didn't. But notice here, now he's going to tell us what she actually believed, even though she didn't write about it. And you would think, well, why didn't she write about it if she believed this, especially if she believed what he says that she believed? You will be interested to know, however, that at a time when there was an epidemic of smallpox in the vicinity, she herself was vaccinated and urged her helpers, those connected with her, to be vaccinated. In taking this step, Sister White recognized the fact that there has been proven that vaccination either renders one immune from smallpox or greatly lightens its effects if one comes down with it. She also recognized the danger of their exposing others if they failed to take this precaution. So this is a pretty bold statement. This would sound that Ellen White was pro-vaccine, that she got it once she saw that the smallpox was raging in her vicinity. She got it. She encouraged everyone else to do it. She also recognized that it had been proven. I mean, this is powerful. That vaccination either renders one immune from smallpox or greatly lightens its effects. So this idea that she was recognizing that vaccines were safe and effective. And, he adds, she also recognized the danger of their exposing others if they failed to take this precaution. Again, this fits squarely with the statement we just read, the official statement. If I knew nothing else except for this statement and I took it as gospel, then the official statement is true. It's true. She recognized that, hey, we need to protect others. This is herd immunity is important. We need to, this is a safe and effective way to prevent the disease. This would be it. And this is why those in leadership are so confident in their position. Now, we're going to read a little bit further because we're going to notice some issues here with his statement as we work through it. And he goes, and now again, here he goes on with more of his story. He goes, I've been taking as a college subject this year a class in rational remedies taught by Dr. Mary McReynolds. I know of no one who's more conscientious in following the testimonies than she is. The question regarding vaccination and serum came up the other one day in class, and she stated that its use was rational. Now he's talking about diphtheria antitoxin, not diphtheria vaccine, but diphtheria antitoxin. There was no diphtheria vaccine at this time. And so he's talking about that. And we're going to address that. And then he's basically saying, even though Ellen White didn't say anything about it, Dr. Mary McReynolds, who is an expert in medicine and also someone who believes in the testimonies, thinks that this would have been something she would have endorsed. So he's smart enough to say she didn't endorse it, but he's also saying that this woman who's a doctor and loves the testimonies endorses, and therefore it's probably a rational remedy according to the definition Ellen White has given. And he goes, it is a fact that the body builds up defense against diseases, not only in human beings, but also in animals. And in putting it into our bodies, the serum from an animal that has had the disease will introduce this valuable element that resists the germs of the disease. This question has been a very serious one in my own experience. For when I was vaccinated, I received an infection that bothered me for several months. This is very many years ago. And I think that with modern methods, the danger of such an infection has very much been lessened. So this is interesting. He was vaccinated and he had a tough time with it, but now he thinks that things have improved, that the smallpox vaccine has been improved and therefore we can trust it. And he says that the Rusungo mission in Africa, the smallpox was all about us and got into the school. After the students were vaccinated, we had not another case, and in no case did we see any ill results. So notice he's definitely justifying the smallpox vaccine by what he saw at the Rusungo, Michigan mission in Africa. So he's giving his opinion about this. Again, everything I'm reading here is all his opinion. The very first part was what he thought Ellen White's opinion was, but he's talking about his opinion. And then he goes on, an uncle of mine, Elder D.A. Robinson, who labored as a missionary in India, was conscientiously opposed to vaccination and refused to take it. He died an awful death with smallpox, and and before he died, he stated that he had made a mistake, which was costing him his life. The rest of the family were vaccinated and suffered no ill effects from smallpox. I just refer to these experiences for you to consider that what attitude you should take regarding this question. So again, notice he gives this experience. I do think it's interesting that his uncle thought that vaccines weren't good. You wonder, where did he ever get that opinion? But hopefully by the time we're done, you'll understand why his uncle believed that way. So he comes off very, very pro-vaccine. The vaccine saved us at the mission in Africa. The lack of the vaccine caused my uncle to die. He believes that vaccines are great, and he also believes that diphtheria antitoxin is great as well. Now we're going to get back to the letters, okay? The letters, because this is the gold standard, right? This is what everyone cites, the 1931 letter of D.E. Robinson. Now, I'm just going to read the part about vaccine. I'm not reading the whole thing again. We've already addressed it, but I'm just going to get back to this. He says right here, he says, if you ask for definite, concise information regarding the Sister White wrote about vaccines and serums, vaccination serum. This question can be answered very briefly, for so far as we have any record, she did not refer to these in the writings. You'll be interested to know, however, that at the time when there was an epidemic of smallpox in the vicinity, she herself was vaccinated and urged her helpers, those connected with her, to be vaccinated. In taking this step, Sister White recognized the fact that it had been proven that vaccination either renders one immune from smallpox or greatly lightens the effects if one does come down with it. She also recognized the danger of their exposing others if they failed to take this precaution. So that is his recounting of her testimony, all right? Her behavior and action. That's D.E. Robinson, all right? Now, this is important to note because this is what he writes in 1931. But what you aren't always told is that he got to answer the same question in 1915, all right? So he answers the very same question in 1915. Now, what we just read here, I want to ask you if you see this in this letter here, all right? We're going to read this entire letter. It's short, but I want you to see if what I just read here is in this letter in 1915, because there's something interesting about this letter in 1915. Ellen White is still alive. She's still alive, all right? So that makes a big difference. This is 1931. 16 years later, in 1915, all right? This is what he says. Your letter addressed to Miss E.G. White came to hand several weeks ago. So he's got another letter asking about vaccines. I mentioned the matter to her one day. So she's alive, but was unable to get anything definite. Whoa, wait a second. What happened to the story here? Where's the story here? He talked to her, to her face, and she could have said to him, D.E., you were there. You were there. Remember that time there was that outbreak of smallpox, and I told you and all the other people working for me that you guys got to get the shot. And then I said, hey, look, it's your choice if you don't want to get the shot. But if you don't get the shot, you may spread smallpox to others. That's not there here. That's not there at all. And he even says he's unable to get anything definite. Well, that doesn't sound like a resounding endorsement of vaccines.
Not at all.
At all. So notice what he says. He goes on. He says, Sister White's writings contain the broad principles
Mm.
that should guide us in all of our work. Amen to that. I believe it. When it comes to details, however, it is necessary for us to study these and come to our own conclusions. Owing to our finite limitations, we do not always see alike on some of these matters. Now, I just want to stop right here. This is a very important statement that he's making. He knows for a fact there are two men who are still alive at this time who are physicians. One is no longer in the church. That is John Harvey Kellogg, who's left a massive impression on the church, and Daniel H. Kress, who is still alive, still in the church, and is a medical doctor. And both of them disagree with what D.E. Robinson is going to say next. They both disagree with what he's going to say next when it comes to vaccines. And so he's like, hey, guys, I couldn't get anything definite from her, but I'm just telling you that, hey, you gotta just take what she says and apply these principles broadly. No story about how she got vaccinated, told everyone to do it. No story about how she recognized herd immunity. Nothing. And now he's going to give a story about how he was vaccinated. And we read that before, how he had a very hard time of it. And then he's going to tell the same story in the second paragraph about his uncle who died, who refused to be vaccinated. And then notice what he's going to say here in the third paragraph. All right. So he's giving his opinion. He's giving his opinion about what he thinks about vaccines because Sister White did not give him anything definite. And I just want to back up just for a second. Do you think if she had said to him, when he asked her, he goes, Mother, because that's what he called her affectionately, Mother, what do you think about vaccines? And she says, well, I don't know, D. I think it's safe and effective, but I'm not sure. You think he would have left that out? You think he would have been like, oh, no, he would have said, well, she says she thinks it's safe and effective. But I have a feeling that when he asked her, which I have evidence for in the next letter we're going to read, that she was probably like, I don't know, DE, because I think there's some issues with it, and I'm not sure. I think there's some things here that give me pause. This is why he's not giving her full opinion on it. Again, I'm speculating, but I have some evidence in the speculation. You'll see why in the next letter. So now he's in his third paragraph, and this is what he says. Not being a medical man, I would not want to give a very decided opinion. That's amazing. Because in the 1931 letter, he's convinced that vaccines and diphtheria antitoxin are in harmony with the health message. But here, he's very, very careful. However, the principle underlying the administration of antitoxin, here he is with his antitoxin, seem to be based on scientific common sense. Of course, it may be carried to extremes. We certainly should not trust to any of these remedies which would be good in themselves to the exclusion of such simple treatments as outlined in the instructions given to us as a people. Now, I want you to see something here. He's even more careful. This last sentence right here. Of course, you will understand that this is only my own personal statement, for which Sister White is in no way responsible. Now, wait a second. I wish he would have wrote that in 1931, because that's exactly what he gave us is his opinion.
Okay. Wow. That's an admission.
That's an admission. And think about this. This letter you never hear. We always hear about the other one, but not this one.
Yes.
And this is where you start to smell that something's not right. Something's not right here in the state of Denmark. There's something wrong. That he's very careful here, has no recollection of this whole outbreak of vaccines, and then he's also very careful to distinguish his opinion about diphtheria and vaccines from Ellen White's own opinion.
Correct.
She's not responsible for what he says there. That's very interesting that he would write that in 1915 while she's still alive. But where did he get the story about her being vaccinated and telling everyone to do so? Because clearly, if he had witnessed it, he would have wrote it. But he didn't witness it. He got it from W.C. White. So W.C. White writes in 1924. So this is after his writing this, but before he writes this one. Before his 1931 statement, after his 1915 statement. And so this is W.C. White, and we're going to read the whole letter here. And I want you to see here, W.C. White, eventually he goes to work at Loma Linda. He believes in vaccines. But notice what he reads here in 1924. This is what he says. I hold in my hand your letter of January 20th asking if I can tell you what the attitude of Miss E.G. White toward vaccination. She regarded it as a perplexing question. Now, wait a second. Just stop right there. He doesn't tell us that she endorsed it. She doesn't tell us that she told everyone else to get it. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't say anything. He says she regarded it as a perplexing question. He says, I do not remember her saying or writing that she had special instruction regarding vaccination. In my earlier days, she spoke of something dangerous and related my own experience. She said, as a child, I was perfectly healthy until I was vaccinated and my health was much impaired. So it sounds like she had given it a shot and she was like, whoa, this is not good. He was made sick. We're not doing that again. And then listen to this. Now, this is the only caveat that he can give. Mother listened attentively to the argument that the methods of vaccination had been improved. And when in our travels, we were brought to a large city where smallpox was raging, and the matter was discussed as to whether or not, or no, that I and my associates should be vaccinated. Now, notice this. D. Robinson tells us in 1931 that she was vaccinated and that she promoted it. But notice that the argument is now the physicians are coming to her and saying, oh, no, it's better now. Things are better. And so they're making a decision whether he and his associates, not her and his associates and himself, but he and his associates should be vaccinated. And he said that she offered no objection. In other words, this is someone who believed it was a perplexing question. And she goes, okay, if you want to do it, that's up to you. But she did not go around promoting it. There's no evidence in this letter here that she herself was vaccinated, because notice what he says this. He says, in view of the argument of physicians that it was not only for her own safety, but for the safety of others, I and my associates were vaccinated. So that's as close as you're going to get. And again, this is his experience that he had with his mom. And only thing that you could say is that she didn't object to their getting the shots. She said, okay, if that's what you want to do, you're an adult, you and everyone can do it. And because they trusted the doctors, they did. But there's no her telling anyone else to get it. There's no her getting it. He doesn't even mention that. As a matter of fact, the very first sentence out of his pen about her opinion is she regarded as perplexing question. Never endorsed it, never told anyone to get it. And this is my problem, is that we have an official statement. We have an official statement where we are saying that the Bible and Ellen White support this practice. And we're looking at what we have. This is the best we have regarding her opinion. And we have nothing about her supporting it. Not one thing, not one endorsement. And so this argument that we're making is bereft of the evidence.
You know, I would also say, even if she had taken it.
Right. Yes.
To compare what was happening then
Yes.
to the recent that we had now with the warp speed and, emergency use and all of that. If you were to compare that one with the one that was recent and to say that is still a reason for you to take it is still not a good argument either. For it to be mandated is still not a good argument. For the church to go along with the state and restrict religious freedom, not give an exemption for them who refuse to take it, is still not a good argument. You
have no more lane to run in on this one. You're out. You're out. And again, here's a woman who talked about the dangers of consuming caffeine. And you think that today she would be like, yes, you're going to take a shot that has aborted fetal cells in it? Go on, game on. You're going to take a shot that has eagle medium insect DNA. You go on. That's great. Like, we really think that she would have signed on to everything that we're doing today? No. And she didn't even sign on to what they were doing back then. She wasn't sure, but and again, this is why I think that our position as a church is we don't have to be anti-vaccine, but our position as a church, we can't wheel her out and say that we must be pro-vaccine either. It doesn't work that way. What we should do is as D. Robinson said in this letter, take the broad principles of her testimonies and apply them on a case-by-case basis. And we refuse to do that, nor do we even consult the Bible when it comes to it.